If you're feeling shy about coming out of a store with a box of condoms, imagine ancient people carrying around animal organs for contraceptives in public. We need to feel more liberated walking with a bag of condoms. Let's learn from our ancestors, as they could probably give us some good old sex education. Back at a time when life expectancy was shorter, when childbirth was more dangerous, and when protection against STDs was flimsier, condoms might have been more for avoiding venereal diseases than babies. Back in 150 BCE, Antoninus Liberalis, in his book Metamorphoses, recounted an old legend about King Minos of Crete. The king probably had the deadliest STD in history. Serpents and scorpions crawled around his semen. One of his mistresses supposedly died from it. To protect himself and his partners, especially his wife Pasiphae, against his semen, Procris, a refugee of the king, came up with an idea that absolutely made perfect sense. She proposed to shove a goat's bladder up inside his partner's. Some argue that it was actually Minos who wore the goat bladder as his sheath. Either way, the legend is a bit questionable. But what's important is that the concept of sexual protection was probably in their minds back then already. The legend has to come from somewhere, right? A more convincing evidence of the first condom use came perhaps from ancient Egypt around 1000 BCE. Linen sheaths. That's more tolerable than a goat bladder. Again, it seemed to have been more intended for protection against diseases, such as bilharzia. Condoms have different colorful flavors now. You have brown for chocolate, red for strawberry, and even yellow for mango. But the color of Egyptian condoms symbolized the more unerotic concept of social strata. There exists even a painting that looks like a bunch of slaves fitting condoms on their master's tools. Okay, perhaps it's erotic if you're into BDSM. That's convincing as the earliest evidence of contraceptives, but the earliest indisputable evidence of condom use came in 1564. It was from Gabriel Falloppio. Yes, the man where the name fallopian tube came from. It was a linen sheath worn for protection against syphilis. It only covered the glands and was tied up with a ribbon. Falloppio was so dedicated in his fight against STDs that he experimented with his condom on 1,100 men. How did goat bladder come to be known as condom though? Well, around the 17th century, King Charles II felt that he had enough illegitimate children. A doctor named Colonel Condom, who would eventually regret his name, shared his prior knowledge of sheaths made from lamb intestines. There are actually no records of any Dr. Condom existing, but it could be possible that he felt so embarrassed being associated with the contraceptive that he eventually changed his name. I know I would. The word condom could be from the Latin word condum, which means receptacle, condamina, which means house, or cumdum, which means scabbard or case. It could be from the Italian word guantone, from the word guanto, which means glove. The Persian word kemdu is also a candidate, meaning an intestine used for storage. The French call it the English raincoat. The English call it the French letter. If you want to use something more slang, instead of saying, "Do you have a condom?" you could actually say, "Do you have a scumbag?" With all the dirty history behind the earliest condoms, we should be more grateful that we're in the era of rubber condoms and birth control pills. Let's all be glad that we don't have to wrap a goat bladder around our tools or shove one up in our boxes.